Hi, and welcome to episode 76 of the Give Me a Crown Knitting, Sometimes Spinning and Bits and Pieces podcast. Today is Wednesday, the 27th of September 2017, and my name's Niina, also known as Give Me a Crown on Ravelry, Instagram, Pinterest. It's the name of my Etsy shop, Facebook, and I think I have a Twitter account and a few other things, but Ravelry and Etsy and Instagram are the main places you can find me. I'm a Finn living in the central tablelands of New South Wales in Australia, and it's lovely to have your company, whether you're a new viewer or a returning viewer. I hope you enjoy the show. Just before I get into what I've been working on in the past couple of weeks, I just wanted to make another mention of the fact that Australia Post are increasing shipping prices on Monday the 2nd of October. So on Friday after I visit the post office, I will be putting up my Etsy shop shipping prices where required. Overall, it's only between nothing and about $1 Australian from memory. I've put all the information in the announcement on Etsy, so you can find it there, but feel free to send me a message on Etsy if you need any further information. It has been slightly wild weather-wise here in the last few weeks. We had almost snow happen the other week, and now it's almost summer, so outside quite easily can get around in a tank top rather than woolly gear, but I don't know where spring went. It seems to have completely been skipped, but that's all right. It's nice to have some warmer weather and having some fun in the garden and all that kind of stuff, which I'll chat about a bit later. If there are any strange crying noises in the background, I apologize. I'm not ignoring a child. The neighbor has acquired a couple of little tiny lambs and they're absolutely gorgeous, but they do have a tendency to cry pretty loudly, so if you do hear anything, don't panic. And most likely the local rooster will probably start crowing anytime soon. What else? My slide-on-by shawl has been released, so that's now available on Ravelry. I want to say a big thank you to my test knitters. They did an amazing job, and I was very, very happy to see how their shawls came out and the feedback that they gave me. The fact that some test knitters cast on a second shawl, I think, is that made me just incredibly happy to see that they were so happy with their first shawl that they had to cast on a second one. Yeah, very, very warm and fuzzy feelings about the whole thing. Thank you to anyone who has purchased the slide-on-by shawl. I hope that you enjoy it. On to what I've been working on. So my first and only finished object are my blueberry waffle socks. So I had this sock finished last time, and this is the second one. And can you notice anything? I may have put in different heels, and I blame Instagram for that. I did ask about some heel options, and there seemed to be an even split between the dark purple and then the purpley grey, so I decided to use both. And these are going to be a gift for my mum, so I'm kind of hoping that she appreciates it. I'm pretty sure she'll get a giggle out of it, out of the fact that she's got different coloured heels. But I don't know, it makes them unique. And I think overall it either looks good. It would have been fun to probably do toes as well to match, but I think they're pretty cool. My mum's going to be the coolest granny in town, I think. The main colour on these socks is the Cola Girl Collective Sully colourway on the Drover sock base. So it's 75% superwash wool and 25% nylon. And this was the blueberry waffle socks, if I didn't mention that already, which is a free pattern by Sandy Turner. When I popped these into wash, there was a little bit of bleeding of the blue dye, but I have a feeling that that's one of those things that just can happen with blue dyes. Red dyes are similar, they can sometimes bleed a bit, but it didn't affect the grey at all, so it was just some of the excess that came off. It did, the yarn softened up a bit. It still feels like a sturdy sock, and it sort of plumped up a little bit. So I think that these are going to wear very, very well, and I think Mum's going to love them. The blueberry waffle sock pattern, I've heard a lot of people talk about it before, and I really enjoyed it. Didn't expect to really like the purling so much, because it is essentially a lot of sort of ribbing with some stockinette in between, but it seemed to fly by, and I really like the effect. They look like very squishy, soft socks, and I think they're going to wear very well. So I will definitely knit those again. I then have a few works in progress, the first of which is a Featherweight cardigan, which is a paid for pattern by Fettig. And I spoke about it a bit on my last episode, and I decided to purchase the pattern on Ravelry rather than the custom fit version, because I figured that it's going to give me a little bit more opportunity to use a pattern in different ways. I think the custom fit one, I might have been locked into a particular gauge and wouldn't have had the freedom to sort of play around with it as much as what I hoped to. I could be completely wrong, but that's what I went with, and it was a bit cheaper to buy just the Ravelry version. So I showed the Miss Click Clack Shark Bay lace yarn that I had bought in the Plum Bum colorway, and it didn't really occur to me how much effort went into winding a skein of lace weight yarn. I've previously used lace weight yarns, but they've been in little balls, and I've just used a center pull method for those. But I had two skeins, and they took a long time to wind. There's I think it's 700 meters on each skein, so it took a while, but you got to do what you got to do. So I did this swatch, and it's my typical not proper size swatch, but it seems to do me okay. I think I went to about 5 inches wide on this one, just to make sure that I was getting a good sense of my stitch gauge, and I think this has got about 2.5 inches of stockinette. And what I tend to do is I measure the 4 inches in a few different places, and then for the stitch count, and then I measure 2 inches in a few places for the row gauge, and then I double that to get my 4x4 inch sort of gauge. When I had knit this, I went to soak it, and I just sort of ran my typical sort of warmish sink of water, and I was about to pop it in when I thought, hang on, can you wash silk in warm water? I don't think I have any silk clothing, but there's something in the back of my head said I probably need to go for a cold wash. So changed the water, put some cooler water in the sink, and gave it a soak. And when it came out, the shape of this was weird. It was stretching in every single different direction, which was a strange thing for me, because this is a 50% merino, 50% silk blend, and I just had this thing in the back of my head that silk doesn't stretch, silk is sort of tight, and I saw this swatch that was just sort of flopping about in every single direction, and it was a bit of an experience. But after it dried, it's taken on its general shape. And while the yarn itself doesn't have much stretch, there's a little bit there, this swatch sort of because of the sort of, because of the loose gauge, you can sort of manipulate it in a lot more directions than what I expected it to. So you could make it that big if you wanted to. Very see-through fabric, obviously, but it's been interesting playing around with the swatch and just sort of seeing how it behaves in comparison to a wool swatch, for instance. But it has a wonderful drape. Absolutely love the way that it feels. It's so soft and slippery and luxurious. I had the feedback about the featherweight cardigan sizing being quite often coming out undersized. So I took my measurements and I had a look at the schematic in the pattern, and I just wasn't entirely sure. My arm circumference was one size and my bust circumference was another, and I ended up going up to the 38 and 3/4 inch size, which is larger than my upper bust and my full bust, but I thought that if I at least aim for that, then I can sort of try it on as I go, because it's knit from the top down, and it's something that I'm fairly comfortable sort of customizing as I go. And I had a read through the rest of the pattern, and it's not a complicated pattern. It's something that an advanced or an intermediate knitter could actually figure out how to construct it themselves. But the nice thing about buying a pattern is that someone's done all the thinking and how many stitches to cast on and what the row gauge is and all that kind of stuff. So that's part of the reason why I bought it, so that I don't have to do that thinking. But I did do a bit of thinking and just thought that if I start it and see how it's going, see how it's measuring and fitting, then I can make some judgments about whether or not I need to cast on extra stitches for the sleeves. So I cast on, and I've managed to squish, I've got 2 balls of yarn in here, or 2 cakes, and my cardigan. So this is technically a one skein project bag, but I like this project bag, so it's now my cardigan bag. This is where I'm up to. So that's the back, and that's how it's looking at the front. As you can see, it's very, very slippery and slidey. So I don't know what the word, it's drapey, it's wonderful. And I've got these gorgeous lime green scrap yarn for holding my stitches for the sleeves. But I'm loving it, absolutely loving it. So this, I started up here on the neck and knit down and got down to where the arms were happening, sort of a few rows before, and I put in a lifeline just in case I needed to continue or rip back. So then I finished up to where I split for the sleeves, and then knit a little bit of the way and tried it on, and it was fitting fine. I measured the back of this, and I measured a store-bought cardigan that I had, and the store-bought cardigan was 2 inches narrower than this, yet they both hang just as nicely. So I'm a little bit puzzled about the whole cardigan fitting thing. I don't know whether it's, I don't know why, but this seems to hang very, very nicely. I was a bit worried that going up to something that's 2 inches larger than a cardigan that I normally wear, I was worried that it could be a bit baggy on the back. But I guess once I put my sleeves in, that might impact the bagginess, but the sleeves seem to be a good size for me at the moment, and I can always reduce some stitches around here if I need to, and that might cinch it in a little bit if for some reason the back's if the back's looking baggy. But I think it's going to be absolutely perfect. I think it's just going to be a slightly oversized but not really nicely drapey cardigan. Oh, look at that. So I'm alternating 2 skeins, and I'm essentially knitting 2 rows on with one skein and then 2 rows with the other. And you can see that there's some little blips of darker and lighter, but there's no pooling or anything like that. So I think it's just looking gorgeous, and it feels so lightweight, and it doesn't look like I've barely used any of my skeins. So I'm thinking that I'm going to end up with a huge amount of yarn left over, so I'm going to have to figure out what to use some leftover silk merino on. But I love this yarn. I'm daydreaming of knitting everything with silk merino yarn at the moment. I think this would be amazing for summer tops and everything, but this cardigan itself is going to be wonderful for summer where I want to cover up my arms. If it's a particularly sunny day and it's not going to make me feel too hot, and in the evenings it's just going to be a little bit of warmth without going overboard. So love it, absolutely love it. And I thought that knitting the featherweight would take forever, and that's one of the reasons why I haven't actually cast it on before, because I've been wanting to make one for a while. But this lace weight is being knit with the same size needles as you would for a fingering weight version, and it's on 4mm needles, which is actually bigger than some of the other fingering weight garments that I've knit. So I'm not sure if I knit the breathing space with a 3.5mm, but this is on 4mm, and it's a little bit see-through, but I like that. I like the way that it looks. I'm really, really happy with it. Oh, I think it's amazing. Can you see me in it? It's going to be great. But yeah, so it's zooming along much faster than I expected it to, and I've been pretty monogamous on it, but I think it's, with another big project coming up soon, I think it's going to slow down a little bit, but it's wonderfully relaxing, meditative, back and forth knitting. Another work in progress is my sock yarn blanket, and I've put in 2 squares since the last episode. So this one is the Cola Girl Collective Drover sock, and in the Sully colourway, and this one is the Dingo Dyeworks Rigididge in the Salt Lake colourway that I knit my slide on by Shawl with. I took a photo of the whole blanket as it currently is, so I'll pop that in here. It has 140 squares at the moment, and I need to start a new row, but I'm not sure whether to make it wider or longer at the moment, so I haven't started that new row. My next work in progress is not exactly a work in progress yet, but it's the Speckle and Pop mystery knit along from Stephen West, and it's my first mystery knit along, and I'm getting very excited about starting it. I have set up a Ravelry thread in the Give Me a Crown Ravelry group. If anyone else is taking part, the Stephen West official sort of threads are very hectic and busy, so I've poked my nose in, but I'm a little bit scared. So if anyone else wants to chat about things just on a sort of a slightly slower pace, then feel free to pop by the Give Me a Crown Ravelry group. To my knowledge, the swatch information that's come out is just a swatch. It's not anything related to the pattern as such, so it's just some basic garter knitting. I'm going to show you what I've been playing with, but if you're sort of wanting to completely remain in suspense, then I will put a timestamp in here about where to jump forward to. I don't want to spoil any kind of surprises, but yeah, I'm not sure this is a surprise to spoil because it's a swatch. This is also going to include some acquisition sort of information. So I have been getting some new yarns. Some of them were sort of with the expectation they would be involved, and some were possibilities and some weren't. So I'll sort of mix and mash up my acquisitions along with this speckle and pop stuff. So oops, that wasn't as dramatic as I was hoping it would be. Okay, so here are some yarns. Eek. This bottom one is a Miss Click Clack, and it's from the first order that I placed with her a few years ago, so I don't remember its name. This is also a Miss Click Clack, this grey and reddish brownish sort of colour, and that's City Kitty. This is a variegated yarn that I bought from Gradient Oz a few years ago, and I know that I follow her on Instagram, and she's been doing a lot of natural dyeing and things and changed her name, and I don't know what, I can't remember what she's called at the moment. And this top one is a Renanoli in the Nymph colorway, which is a new acquisition. So my original plan, because you need 3 colors, was I definitely wanted City Kitty in there. And then I ordered the Nymph, and I ordered another skein which I can't pick up right now, but I'll show in a minute. So I was going to sort of combine them, but then I thought that maybe the color difference was too much, so then I popped in this Gradient Oz one, and then I was worried and thought that maybe I needed a different grey. So at the moment there's a few different skeins going on, and I've started my little swatchy stuff, which is a complete another tangle because I haven't cut any of the yarns because I don't want to run out of yarn. So this is my swatch with those 4 colours, and I cast on with the City Kitty at the end here, the dark grey, and did the sort of two rows alternating into the Gradient Oz colour, and I just noticed how absolutely obvious. That's not a fade, that's just stripes. I'm much happier with the fade between the Renanoli and the Gradient Oz. While there's a difference in contrast, I think that colour-wise they seem to blend a bit better. And then between the Renanoli and this other Miss Click Clack, they just sort of seem to go together much better than the City Kitty that I absolutely love. But then I was wondering if I could put the City Kitty with the other Miss Click Clack, which has got the greys in it, and then go into the Renanoli. So it could go from grey to grey and white to a sort of greeny, yellowy pops of colour on the end. So I was playing with this last night and it was getting late, so I didn't get a chance to pop the grey up here to see if that might work. But then I don't get to use the Gradient Oz. But it is a variegated, and I wasn't sure how well the variegated would work. It looks like some of the suggestions for the colours do have variegateds in there, and I'm still happy with how that looks. I like that transition. But then I'm not entirely convinced now about, because that goes so light, maybe I need to move this grey one in between these two. So I think tonight I'm going to be unraveling and playing around with a different order to figure out the 3 that I want. And I've been popping some minis in one of my big bags just in case, because this is from Smudged, and this is the first time I've ordered from Smudged yarns, and I'm so loving this base. It's absolutely squishy. It's an 80% superwash merino, 20% nylon, 407 yards in 100 grams. This is the fresh mint colorway. I love this. I could make myself all sorts of things out of this. So I bought this with the intention that it would go nicely with the Renanoli, and I think that they would, but then I just don't, it just wasn't going to work with this City Kitty. But then I started thinking about these other colors, so maybe maybe I could do those 3. So the grey speckle from Miss Click Clack, the smudged yarn, and then I'm just not sure how faded this whole fading idea should be, or how contrasty or not. So I'm playing with those. And then these are a couple of the colour pops that I'm thinking of using. So these are from Renanoli. And these are a couple of smudged yarns, again the same wonderful soft base. But now I'm starting to think if I go to, because these were going to work really well with the City Kitty, because they're slightly speckled and the City Kitty is not too, it's a low contrast within itself, but with the other yarns they might be too speckly. I then have some leftover Miss Click Clack that would work, and some more. This is the Ansel Adams. These are from some socks that I did a while ago, so that would work with any of them. And then in my big bag, these are the other smudged yarn minis. So there's still possibilities depending on what I end up choosing for my colours. But I bought these before I went through my stash and found that Gradient Oz brownie coloured one. There's another Renanoli, which would go nicely with, at least with the darker colours, but at the moment I don't know whether or not the pops of colour are going to go across all colours or whether they're just going to go across some colours. So that's part of the reason why I have such a big bag of bits. That, I think that's, yep, that's from my top. That's some leftover. That would go with the lighter colours. I'm not sure if there's enough of these because you need 20 grams, but they're sort of different greys. I think one is a Circus Tonic Handmade, one is a Miss Click Clack. I have a lot of greys. There's another, an even lighter grey. And then this is some Hedgehog Fibres in the Malice colourway. It's dark brown, it would go with the lighter colours. So, not too sure at the moment what to do about it. And now I'm covered in yarn. So at the moment it's still just a lot of playing and swatching, but I'm really enjoying that. It's nice to be able to play with the colours, especially when I don't generally use sort of such bright colors or combine them in such a way. Like I tend to use a lot of browns and grays or single solid colors, so it's a lot of fun. So I'm sure that next time I will have something on the go, because the knit along starts on Friday or probably Saturday my time, and it's very exciting. One other acquisition this week, or rather a gift. My mum seems to have found the Knit Picks website all on her own, and she ordered me these. So they're not going to show up very well, but they're 3 different types of yarn guides for doing colour work. So she thinks that I obviously need to do more colour work. Is this a hint? Does she want colour work socks for Christmas? I might need to do her some kind of colour work, but I've never used one of these yarn guides before. So you basically pop it on your finger and then feed the yarn through in different ways. But I'll have a bit of a play with those in between all the other things that I'm working on, and I'll let you know how they go, whether or not some are better than the others. I haven't bought them before because I just wasn't convinced that they would make things easier. I was worried that my gauge would go completely off by not having control over things, but I've got them, so I'll give them a try. Apart from that, just a little bit of chatter and stuff, but I bumped into Amaroo coloured wool. They're on Facebook, and Amaroo is in Gunning in New South Wales, which is between Goulburn and Yass, which is just to the north of Canberra. And I had seen Nadine from Adagio Mills had posted on Instagram about a bit over a month ago that she had seen Amaroo at the Blayney farmers market, which is held once a month, and I was driving in about a week and a half ago, and I remembered, oh, I think it's market day, so I drove by, and it was just as everyone was packing up, but they were still there. They had some of their yarn still hanging up. Small scale spun, maybe might be the word for it, that they make of their wool, and they had some fibre there as well, but they were sort of running pretty low. They said that they're coming up to shearing season, so this says that they're at local markets from April to September, and they're at the Murray Bateman field days in October, which would be coming up soon. But from up until April, they won't be doing any other local markets anymore. That it's shearing time. They're getting all the fleece off their sheeps and their alpacas. So they've got Australian merinos, corridales, and merino cross sheep, and it seemed interesting. I just wasn't in the market at all for any kind of wool at the time, but they seem like lovely folk. So next time I'm after probably some fibre. I think in April I'll try to pop by the Blayney markets and pick up some fibre from them so I can do some spinning. Apart from that, my sewing machine went in for a service at my local fabric shop, and it's, in a way, it's kind of good that I can get it done locally, but locally means driving 200 kilometers over 2 days, or 24 hours really, because I dropped it off in one afternoon and then picked it up the next afternoon. But it was all good. They were lovely people. I love my little local fabric shop in Cowra. They're very, very friendly, very helpful. It's always good to go in there for a chat, so it's great that they have this service where a sewing machine repairman, service man, he travels around different regions and services the machines. But the other places where I've asked about it before that are within driving distance of here, they take your sewing machine away for a few weeks and send them to Sydney. So, and just for a machine that I use pretty much every day of the week. I can't live without it for 2 weeks. And I can definitely, I can use my old machine or I can borrow a machine, but I like my machine. I have been attacking the garden with the weather warming up a little bit. I realised that I probably need to get my veggie patch happening again. So I did some clearing out of things. I did leave some carrots in the ground for 9 months. I think they were meant to have been in there for 3, but I just wanted to see if they would actually grow to a reasonable size. And they did. I don't know if they're edible. I haven't actually sort of munched on one yet. I think I'll be cleaning them up tonight and seeing if they're tasty at all. I'm worried that because they were in the ground for so long, whether they've lost all flavour, but who knows. My gardening is a little bit ad hoc and random and make it up as you go along, which isn't necessarily the best thing to do. But I've put some soil in with the previous sort of where I had my veggie patch last summer, and I think that I think it'll sort of help whatever grow this time. The soil seemed to be a lot happier. It's a very clay soil, so I think that's why I had more success with things that grew above ground, things like zucchinis and lettuces, rather than carrots and beetroots, which grow below ground because they can't sort of break the clay apart. But I think the clay is looking a lot softer now, so I think having put it through 1 year's vegetable patch paces, I think has probably done it some good. So I've planted a whole bunch of seeds, and my parsleys were still going and my strawberries were still going, so all the plants are still alive, so I left them there and just replanted everything else. So we'll see what happens over the coming weeks and months. As for my Swedish practice, I have been watching The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo in Swedish, just a little bit here and there. I guess I don't tend to want to watch a film that's in a foreign language while I'm knitting, because I'm sort of looking at my knitting, looking at the screen, and it just gets a little bit too much. So I'm just sort of watching little bits and pieces here and there, and it's just helping tune my ear to the Swedish language. So I have high hopes. I think I am going to be able to at least understand Swedish, I'd say within the next year. I think my ear will be tuned. I'm already picking up on words just by listening. I can sort of get little bits of the gist of what's being said. So I think my ear is definitely getting tuned, but to be able to fluently understand what somebody's saying to me, I think will take a little bit more time. But that's not too bad. Yeah. What else? I am planning a trip to Melbourne, so if anyone has any suggestions about yarn events that are happening in Melbourne from mid-October through to mid-December, I would love to know, so that I can coordinate a little holiday. I desperately need a holiday. I haven't had a holiday for a very long time, and it would be a real pity to go on a holiday and then find out that I missed a yarn event by a couple of days. I've never been to a yarn event really, so it would be fun to be able to do that. I know that the ones in Melbourne seem to be very, very good. I think that's it. I'm going to go and sit with the birds, I think, for a little bit. The birds are chirping outside, and I'll enjoy a bit of sunshine before I get on with the rest of my day. Have fun, and I'll see you soon.